The hero confidently pulled the door handle and it creaked open. The bright rays of the sun blinded my face. It was quite a hot summer. Our hero lit a cigarette and stared somewhere. A weak voice could be heard in the background, wanting to know who sent him. The hero turned around and saw a bloody man crawling towards him. The wounded man promised that soon someone from another branch would come to kill him. He could no longer cope with anything alone. The crawling man tried to force our hero to kneel until the very end, but he didn't care. He calmly loaded the pistol. The next moment he was tired of the man's conversations and he shot at him. In an instant, the hero's face was stained with blood. As he was about to leave the building where he had dealt with the bandit, his gaze was drawn to a small creature. This creature turned out to be the main character's little dog. He was happily floundering on the ground and greeting his owner. The dog's name was Baby, and although the hero was covered in blood, he smiled happily because the puppy had waited for him. He explained to the puppy that he needed to hurry home, where he could give his pet some treats. The main character, Kirk, was a #1 killer by profession, usually leaving behind mountains of corpses. On the way home, the boy and his dog met a woman who was talking to her son, and he was begging her not to go to school, and she in turn was making excuses and saying that she would cook him something tasty. Kirk wondered if there was anything tasty left at home for the kid. At this time, the phone vibrated, and a message arrived with a task in which there was an opportunity to conquer some Murim. Our hero thought that it was spam again. Finally, he reached the pet store and was already looking with interest at the treats for his pet. He was so absorbed in choosing food for the kid that he didn't notice a man approaching him from behind. A voice was heard next to the hero, but Kirk continued to look at the shelves with goods. Finally, he reluctantly turned to the man who had approached and asked if he was talking to him. The man confirmed this assumption, and our hero was very surprised by this. He looked warily towards the stranger. He pulled a gun out of his jacket and pointed it straight at Kirk. He said that this was the perfect day for him to die. He said goodbye to killer #1, and Kirk in turn only sighed in resignation, realizing the situation he had found himself in. The next moment a shot rang out. The hero died alone, but his consciousness still could not understand how the kid would be without him. Suddenly his consciousness began to clear and he opened his eyes, seeing the baby's bent face above him and the face of an unfamiliar bald man. Not used to such closeness, Kirk jumped up and punched the stranger right in the nose with his face. The hero grabbed his head and could not understand whether he was really dead or not. He remembered perfectly well that he was shot. His faithful friend Baby was wagging his tail nearby, looking at his owner with satisfaction. Everything was fine with him. The bald man was still pinching his nose, but he began to talk about how their prayers had been heard and that a savior had come to them. Kirk looked around and realized that he was surrounded by a crowd of unfamiliar people, all of whom were rejoicing at the arrival of a savior. One of them boldly approached our hero and greeted the savior. Kirk looked at him suspiciously. The speaker was the bald first elder of the blood sect, Doc. Kirk still couldn't understand what kind of savior the crazy bald man was talking about and continued to look at the man. The bald man had only one small request, and that request was the conquest of Murim. Our hero was completely confused. This was the first time he had heard about some Murima. For a moment he even wondered where he was and what this strange place was. This was not the world he knew before, but a place called Murim in a completely different dimension. And to conquer it, all these people called on Kirk. The killer looked at the faces of everyone present and, realizing their intentions, admitted that they were just idiots. He tried to open his phone to check for a signal, but there was none, and it seemed to the hero that this was collective madness. Finally, he came to his senses and suggested to these people to send him back. Otherwise, they would regret it. He told them that he had to catch his killer at any cost, and the bald ones, in turn, wondered if this was their savior. Kirk turned to the elder and called on him to stop hanging noodles on his ears and return back. The elder, in turn, broke out in a cold sweat from misunderstanding. Everyone around burst out laughing, recognizing the audacity of their savior, and Kirk covered his ears with his hands from the excess noise. He didn't like all of this. One of the servants ran up to the hero and explained that the elder was not bald, he just didn't have hair growing. Some of those present thought how disgusting this was and that they had angered God. The first elder became angry and blushed deeply. He did not like the fact that everyone now knew about his secret. Meanwhile, the hero had already gotten up from the ground and the head of the blood sect approached him. He promised Kirk that if he didn't learn to watch his words, he would be dead. The killer was amused by this whole situation and assured the chief that he was mistaken, since they were the first to call him. He advised the old man to choose his expressions carefully when speaking to him. Otherwise, if the old man continues to threaten, our hero will finish him off himself. At this time, a bald man ran up to both angry men and began to complain about the way the hero was talking to the chief. The chief calmed his servant and suggested that he talk to him himself. He looked at Kirk sternly and defiantly and offered to make a bet. If the hero wins, he will get the position of the head. The bald elder was completely taken aback by such words and again blushed nervously. Our hero wanted to say that he didn't need anything at all. The main thing was to be sent to his world. But before he could finish his sentence, he felt a powerful vibration throughout his body. The leader standing in front of him suddenly became filled with some kind of hellish energy, the pressure of which Kirk also felt. He had never felt this way in all his time as an assassin, but on the other hand, he didn't want to worry, since his opponent was an old man. Kirk knew that as the best killer and battle demon, he simply could not lose, and he prepared his fists for battle. The killer looked seriously at his grandfather and said that he had no need to prepare for a fight with his grandfather. He decided to give in to his grandfather in the first attack, so that he would attack first, and his grandfather, in turn, would guess how much longer Kirk could be rude. As soon as the start of the fight was announced, the old man suddenly disappeared from the killer's field of vision with some kind of whirlwind. Kirk didn't understand what had happened and became wary. He couldn't understand where the old man had suddenly gone. Suddenly, the old man appeared right in front of Kirk's nose and swung at him. The next moment, the head of the blood sect hit the killer so hard that he flew back several dozen meters. Our hero hit his back painfully against the wall, leaving a mark on it. Blood gushed out of his mouth and all his organs felt like they were being squeezed. He sank helplessly to the ground, while the old man mocked him for not being able to even repel a basic attack. The chief was already beginning to doubt that such a helpless guy was their savior. He would have continued to mock further, but then the kid ran up and sank his little teeth into the leader's leg. Kirk's eyes distorted with horror. He ordered his dog to run away, but it did not listen. He became very angry and said that if the chief touched even a hair on his fur, he would finish him off. But the old man didn't listen and kicked the puppy so hard that it flew off and landed behind Kirk. The chief ordered the bald elder to lock the murderer in prison and feed the dog to the wolves. Kirk, in turn, screamed hysterically that the kid was not some kind of animal, but part of his family. But the old man didn't care, and the killer whispered that he had promised to kill him if he touched the kid. Kirk slowly rose from his knees and asked the old man if he was interested in who was the strongest in the world. The bald elder thought that the killer had gone crazy after the blow. The old man finally turned to Kirk, who explained that the most powerful thing in the world was neither money nor power itself. He explained that the strongest one is the one who holds the gun, and with these words Kirk took out his gun. He didn't spend much time explaining anything else to the old man, or explaining how the thing worked. Kirk simply pulled the trigger, aiming it at his grandfather's head. The bullet pierced the headman's forehead, and the elder standing next to him only had time to be surprised. The blood sect leader fell to the ground dead, while his servant continued to stand there with his eyes wide open. He turned red with anger again and shouted at the top of his voice for the people there to attack Kirk. Hundreds of people rushed to attack to avenge the death of the head of their sect. Kirk, in turn, pulled out another gun and now pointed two pistols at the people running towards him. He accurately hit one after another in the head, and the people running towards him fell to the ground, killed. The elder understood that things were bad. He even started sweating from fear and begged that at least someone would stop the killer. He remembered how, long ago, one of the men in a street gang had cowered in fear and made it clear that they were surrendering and needed mercy. Kirk looked at the man with disdain and said that his principle was that there was a limit to mercy. The next moment, he hit the young man in the face with his fist as hard as he could. Kirk grabbed the attacker by the hair, preventing him from falling. He knew that there was no limit to revenge. Kirk was once the leader of a gang of night ghosts, and he had never lost to anyone. After the fight, a voice called out to him, saying that he was strong here, because there was no one who could defeat him. He also asked him if he really knew who was strong here. Kirk didn't understand what the big guy was talking about and asked again if the guy considered him a nobody. He looked up at the brute and then suggested bringing to him the one who, in his opinion, would be stronger. But the next moment, Kirk felt a sharp pain in his leg, and the thug told him that no matter how strong his fist was, the gun was stronger. The boy fell to his knees and clutched his wounded leg, blood oozing from the bullet hole. The brute explained to Kirk that he had come to make a lucrative offer, which made him angry because he didn't have to shoot and just explain the gist of it. The man smiled broadly and said that Kirk was faking, and he thought the big guy was some kind of crazy person. After these words, the thug aimed his gun at our hero's forehead and explained that one of his fingers would decide the outcome. The big guy offered Kirk to work for him to make him stronger. Having moved to the present time, our hero stood over the elder who was wounded in the shoulder and asked him if he understood who was the strongest. Some of the people were lying on the ground, killed and bloodied. The elder broke out in a sweat and shouted that he was ready to give Kirk anything, if only he would leave him alive. After some time, the killer was already sitting on the throne as the new head of the blood sect. At this time, Happy Little One was made deputy head of the blood sect. Our hero thought that the old man had gone completely insane, because he had only asked to be sent back home. Cold sweat ran down the old man's body again. He tried to justify himself. In fact, the elder didn't know how to make Kirk go home. Such mumbling only angered the killer, and he rose from his throne to put the barrel to the old man's temple. Kirk was about to send the elder to meet with his former leader, but he asked him to stop. He fell to his knees and asked for a few days to find a way. Our hero was fed up with this whole situation and, wrinkling his face, he let the old man go in search of a solution. The old man ran from the throne room as fast as he could, and the guy, looking after him, thought only about whether to kill him. Kirk sat back down tiredly on his throne, thinking about how stupid the situation was, and he couldn't even get a phone signal. Suddenly, the phone in our hero's hand rang. All this time, he thought there was no signal. Kirk received the same message he received before he died and thought it was spam. The message was about Murim. In order to return to the previous universe, he had to complete one mission, conquering Murim. If he doesn't do it within a year, he will lose something very valuable. And this valuable payment for Kirk will be the kid. Our hero urgently went to look for the first elder to talk to him. At this time, the elder did not know that the hero had entered the room and continued to verbally insult the killer. When Kirk loomed over him like a thundercloud, the old man was so frightened that he almost kicked the bucket. He lied that he had been swearing at his son all this time and that he was packing his things because he was planning to go in search of a way. The old man begged the new leader to let him live because his death would do no good anyway, but Kirk rejected this. The elder continued to chatter non-stop until the boy finally made him shut up. He raised his fist high above him and screamed at the top of his lungs for him to shut up, after which our hero cleared his throat and began to concentrate on his thought. He suggested that the old man try to conquer Murim, which immediately made him happy and embarrassed. However, before he could begin preparing, Kirk had one condition. After some time, the first elder came out to the people to convey the order of the new leader. From that moment on, they were no longer a blood sect. They were a baby sect. Hundreds of people, seeing the dog baby drawn on the scroll, began to shout enthusiastically and praise him. Some people, on the contrary, thought it was a stupid name and wanted to run away before it was too late. Others, on the contrary, praised the little dog Malash with foam at the mouth, at the same time being touched by his appearance. The dog himself was immensely happy and surrounded by care. Now this sect has not only changed its leader, but they have also changed their name. The old man stood by the window and thought about how they were no longer a blood sect, but a baby sect. The old man's name was Gwen. He was an elder of the moon sect, who believed that a new wind would blow into the dying sect. The old man asked his servant if there was any information about the new leader. The minister said that the leader used some strange magic balls, and one movement with them would kill a person. The old man did not believe it, and asked what kind of amazing movements these could be, and the servant showed him his finger. The servant explained that the chief had moved only one finger, and showed the old man his middle finger. Gwen asked if it was the other head who had shown that finger, and then the servant began to doubt it. At this time, the fifth elder of the former blood sect, Daniel, was indignant about how the leader could be changed without their knowledge. The second elder of the former blood sect, Dwayne, reasoned that the leader should be the strongest in any case. Daniel still couldn't accept it. He was initially against calling some kind of savior. Fourth elder, Yustaf, also couldn't understand how such a decision could be made without them. Dwayne explained that if they had any claims, they would be able to prove it on their own. He only asked them to remember one thing, that the head of the sect would easily defeat them. At this time, Kirk entered the elder's office with a bald elder who introduced him. All three elders immediately stood up from their seats and greeted the new leader. The fat elder dared to approach the little puppy standing at the headman's feet. Yustafa was surprised how such a small and cute animal could get there. The next moment, Kirk kicked the fat man in the face with all his might, mockingly asking if he thought the kid had galloped here himself. He asked Yustaf not to open his mouth again. The fat man grabbed his nose and fearfully apologized to the new leader. When the council of elders began, Kirk lounged at the head of the table and put his feet up on the table. He explained to the elders that they were now beginning to capture Murim, but this information was clearly not to their liking. In addition, the new leader informed everyone that if they failed to conquer Murim within a year, they would all die. He asked the elders, crossing his legs, how it was possible to conquer Murim in a year. Dwayne explained that it was simply impossible to do this in such a short time. He wanted to say something else, but the chief shut him up. only because he seemed crazy to him. Kirk asked Dwayne again if he really thought that it was impossible to conquer Murim in a year, and he confirmed his words. Then Daniel intervened in the conversation. He was pissed off because the new guy was talking to them so brazenly. Even though Kirk had defeated the previous leader, Daniel couldn't accept it. He offered to fight him for the position of leader in order to win the trust of the other elders. Kirk just chuckled. He explained that it was they who offered him to conquer Murim. However, Daniel thought that Kirk wasn't that bad. Apparently, he also had his own strange skills, just like the previous leader. The killer thought that he needed to conserve his bullets, since there weren't many left. At this time, Daniel watched the quiet leader and wondered why he was so quiet. Was he really scared? The bald elder asked not to bother the new leader and to calm down, since he saw what he was capable of. Meanwhile, Daniel approached Kirk and mockingly asked him if he was chickening out. The leader didn't take long to figure it out, pulled out a gun and pointed it straight at the red-haired big guy. He was just going to finish him off. Suddenly the phone rang and our hero didn't have time to pull the trigger. This made the red-haired man even more amused. He looked like some kind of bully. Finally, Kirk approached the elder and said that he agreed, and he was surprised by such an unexpectedness. The new boss offered Daniel a bet on something. It seemed to him that the red-haired man simply wanted to deprive him of his place. But Daniel saw his aura now and remained silent, and Kirk asked him if he had chickened out by any chance. As the heroes emerged into the fresh air to fight, a crowd of onlookers discussed the red-haired man's recklessness. They knew Daniel's weirdest trick. It consisted in the fact that he makes the aggressor get tired and fall down without strength, while they are trying with all their might to attack the red-haired one without causing damage. It is said that he can withstand even a snake attack, and thanks to this he got his nickname, the Hardy Tiger. Suddenly, a plump man approached the talking crowd and said that he had once already seen the power of the new leader. There was not a single cloud that day. The weather was clear and sunny, but suddenly a thunderstorm sounded and the previous leader died, after which the battle began. With the movements of the present leader, all the people fell one by one, as if from flashes of lightning. He looked so merciless and he did not spare anyone, even the powerless old man. It was then that the plump man came up with a suitable nickname for him. Even an evil spirit would freeze in fear before him. He called him the Demon Suppressor. The young men were surprised by the man's story and called the nickname loud. Just at this time, it was announced that the new head and the fifth elder were coming to the arena. This was supposed to be the battle of the century. The enduring tiger must fight against the demon restrainer. Daniel asked Kirk if he was ready to receive. The chief was not at all embarrassed by these words, and with an evil look noted that the red-haired man, like everyone else, did not miss the opportunity to chat before being shot. The host said that as the leader had requested, the battle would be resolved with just one blow. The rules were simple, and the winner of this battle would be able to decide the fate of the loser. The host explained that they had to choose a starter and asked the leader who would start first. Red-haired called himself a hardy tiger and offered to let Kirk make the first attack. He didn't hesitate. He took his gun out of his jacket and explained that he would attack his opponent's chest. Daniel laughed because he thought he could easily defend this place. He built blocks of his pumped-up arms in front of his chest and prepared to attack, thinking that the boss wouldn't break through them. Before the big guy had time to feel the blow to his chest, the bullet hit him straight in the leg. The red-haired man didn't manage to land a single blow and fell to the ground with a bullet in his knee. Daniel couldn't stand it and shouted that Kirk had promised to hit in a different place and had not kept his word. The chief, in turn, smiled fiercely and said that he was joking. The red-haired man thought that he was showing such a weak appearance in front of the junior elders. He needed to calm down quickly and get to fighting because he still had his other leg. He rose from his knees and tried to scare Kirk into worrying about his powerful punches. Daniel had huddled up like a large boulder and was threatening to bring suffering as if he were being torn apart by a tiger. He rushed towards the head with his fists, but before he could land a single blow, another shot was heard, and a bullet hit him in the leg. The leader looked arrogantly towards Tiger, holding the smoking barrel in his hand. The fight leader explained that in such a fight, blows must be delivered in turns. But Kirk didn't want to hear anything. He pointed out that the rules were not written down anywhere. The red-haired man knew he had to move, but his strength was leaving him. Kirk approached Daniel at this time with a gun and pointed it at his head. He said that in order to get out of the tiger's den alive, you only need to have a gun. Daniel was seriously scared. Cold sweat ran down his face. He decided to repent and admit that he was wrong. Kirk did not put away the pointed pistol and said goodbye to the red-haired man. Daniel, in turn, cowered in fear, closed his face, after which our hero mockingly began to make sounds of gunshots with his mouth. Kirk then turned around and explained that Daniel now owed him his life. The red-haired man couldn't understand why on the one hand he felt so annoyed, but on the other hand, he didn't. Kirk at that moment realized that he had no bullets left, so fighting Daniel was very dangerous. Suddenly he received a new message on his mobile. It said that the mission in which he had to defeat the red-haired man he completed successfully. Kirk asked the first elder how many there were in total, and he replied that there were 5, but the third was missing. At this time, having cut down 100 people, someone's hand reached out to the maid for a clean towel. It was a girl. She wiped her face with a towel and said that someone was trying to restore the organization to death. But since the new head has defeated the old head and the 5th elder, things are getting more interesting. The girl was getting ready to meet the new head. It was the 3rd elder, Ginny. At this time, the dog had been baring his teeth since early morning and snapping nervously. Kirk opened his eyes to see the huge, shaggy head of Daniel, who had greeted him in the morning. Taken by surprise, the leader punched the speaker in the face with all his might. Our hero was seriously scared by what he saw, and Daniel told him how he had been learning defense in the morning. He trained so hard in case someone wanted to disturb the leader's sleep, but it turned out that the only thing disturbing his sleep the most was him. After the red-headed man left, the bald elder immediately appeared, indicating that he had been asked to appear in the morning. When everyone had gathered in the hall, the leader asked them to take the trouble to explain to him why he was their savior and why they needed to conquer Murim. Dwayne expressed a desire to tell the chief what was going on and raised his hand. He explained that the union of all the sects is called Murim, and before they did not take the sects seriously. They looked disgusting in their eyes, and their envy at that time reached its limits and became the reason why the fire broke out. Due to the quantitative advantage of their opponents, they suffered defeat and eventually fell, becoming fodder not only for the sects, but also for the other schools. The leader was surprised by this information. He realized that, apparently, they did not belong to any alliance of sects. Dwayne answered in the affirmative. He just followed their principles and lived peacefully. But if it would bring results, then with such a savior as the head, they would like to unite Murim similar to hell. And to make it a place of peace and tranquility, however, it will be practically impossible to do this in a year. Kirk looked at Dwayne with confusion, wondering why he had to protect their peace like a superhero at all. He said that there is no peaceful unification even in the country, and why he should become their savior. Here the bald elder admitted that they themselves did not know why Kirk had arrived. He said that on the day they were attacked by Murim, strange events happened. That day, the old man knelt before the warrior with the sword and begged him not to kill him because he was already helpless. Suddenly, a hooded wanderer appeared next to the guard, and the guard did not understand where he came from. The next moment, the wanderer twisted the guard's head and threw him to the ground. The old man screamed in fear. Instead of killing the elder, the wanderer threw him a scroll, which said that on the day written there, a savior would arrive who would unite the Murim, so they should be ready. The bald old man grabbed the scroll and, still trembling, asked what kind of savior was about to arrive. Kirk leaned his hand on his fist and asked if the old man knew this traveler, to which he replied that he did not know him. But he knew one fact. He, like the old man, had no hair. Kirk had a feeling that the hooded stranger had sent him here, but he didn't know what purpose he had in mind. Suddenly, a wounded knight ran into the office, knelt down and apologized for disturbing him. He explained that the leader needed to go outside and see for himself what was happening. When the leader and the elders came out to the threshold of the palace, he saw many people lying dead at his stairs. He heard a voice apologizing for killing the chief's men because they were preventing him from getting inside. The speaker turned out to be the sinister Kirk, the owner of a sect of ghostly swordsmen. Behind him stood an equally angry crowd of soldiers following him. Kirk said that everyone was so eager to get their hands on the blood sect, which was collapsing after Murim's attack. And just in time, the former leader fell. The stranger grabbed his sword and explained that he could not pass up such delicious food. Kirk winced in disgust. He understood that the scary guy had decided to set his sights on an empty sect. Kirk laughed and admitted that the chief was a smart guy. He was interested in what he would do. Then a huge soldier with an axe on his shoulder stepped out from behind the scarecrow's shoulder and explained that he could deal with the chieftain alone. Meanwhile, Kirk didn't understand what was happening to the body of that monster and why it was all purple. But before the chief could finish his thought, the thug with an axe rushed straight towards him. A cold sweat ran down Kirk's face as he realized how fast the big guy was. He urgently needed a gun, but when he put his hand in his robe, he did not find it and realized that this was the end. The big guy approached the hero and jumped up with a roar to smash him in half with an axe. But it was not to be. The plump Yustaf protected him with his body, wounding his hands in the process. He explained that no one dares to attack the leader. Daniel, who was also there, agreed with Yustaf. He didn't like the fact that outsiders invaded their sect and attacked the leader. He became enraged and struck the Scarecrow's servant with all his might. Kirk, standing behind them, finally began to realize that these guys were quite powerful if used correctly. Kirk was even more amused by the whole scene. His face turned gray and his veins became even more tense. The chief didn't like that his opponent was talking too much. He took out his dagger and suggested listening to him carefully. He explained to the stranger that he does not avoid those who offer him a fight, but he does not leave them alive either. As soon as the leader gave the order to kill, his fighters rushed to fight Kirk's soldiers. Plump Yustaf wanted to run away into battle like Daniel, but he tripped and tumbled down the stairs in front of the leader, who in turn thought he was some kind of idiot. Daniel admitted that he was bored before the battle, so now he was ready to attack. One of Kirk's servants drew his sword and rushed straight at the red-haired man. But Daniel didn't even move from his place, but simply caught the attacker by the blade of his sword. The next moment, he broke it in half and killed the attacker. He just took it and slammed its head into the ground with all his might. Meanwhile, Plump Yustaf was also running next to him, who was already all wounded but tried to cover Daniel in this way. One of Kirk's henchmen rushed at Yustaf, hoping that he would not survive the attack. But the plump man caught his blade with his hand, letting him know that no wounds would be a threat to him. The next moment, he struck the attacker with his plump hand. The bandits standing aside thought that this leader had settled in so easily, obviously using some kind of trick in the battle with the previous leader. They decided to kill him right then and there and rushed towards Kirk with swords. However, a demon with red eyes appeared behind one of the runners. The next moment, this demon had already broken the neck of one of the attackers. The demon turned out to be Kirk, who also easily cut down the second attacker with his sword. The rest of Kirk's henchmen also rushed towards the leader to kill him, but they clearly underestimated him. The next moment, he was already hovering high in the air with the dagger. He picked off one soldier after another as skillfully as a real ninja. Before hunting, these weaklings had to know who their opponent was. Daniel stood in the middle of the battlefield and looked at the many corpses. He thought that it was probably all over, but at that very moment, a sword whistled next to him. It was Kirk, who decided to cowardly attack Daniel from behind. Kirk also had poison that he had once stored for the future. She angrily attacked Daniel, wishing him to go to his former leader. But he concentrated all his energy in his fist and struck back at the sword. Kirk was still rummaging through his robe, searching for his pistol, which had disappeared somewhere at such an important moment. At that moment, his little dog, Baby, ran straight to the leader on the battlefield with a pistol in his teeth. Kirk knew it would be hard to defeat such a serious opponent without a pistol. He knew he had to save every bullet, but he couldn't leave the danger alone, and he aimed his pistol. At this time, Daniel was already quite exhausted. Due to the effects of the poison, his body was a little weakened and he could not move normally. Kirk burst out laughing and promised to take this sect of the kid for himself. But before he could finish his thought, he was wrapped in chains, thrown from somewhere above by an unknown fighter. These chains bound and choked him, while a fighter flew towards him from above. The next moment, the monster was cut in half into 2 equal parts. The killer turned out to be Ginny. She wanted to greet the leader in a calm atmosphere, but the situation forced her to act differently. She turned to the head and finally greeted him. He realized that this was the third elder. Kirk looked the third elder over carefully from head to toe and decided that she would be more useful than the others. Suddenly, at that moment, the third elder attacked the hero with a sword, wanting to know the level of his skill. Kirk instantly blocked the attack, and the elder decided that he had not defeated the previous leader by accident. When Ginny wanted to draw her sword and attack the leader again, he advised her not to do so, as he was not polite enough to take the attack twice. Kirk pulled out his gun, and the third elder thought that it didn't look like something that could defeat the previous leader. But nevertheless, she felt a very strong aura emanating from the new leader, as if she takes one more step, she will die. The bald elder was taken aback by horror. He understood that it was scary with the two of them. Ginny said that only a strong person could be the head of a cult, so she had to check Kirk. She bowed to the new leader and asked for forgiveness for her rudeness. At this time, the big guy with the axe, who had been knocked out by the red-haired elder, woke up. He jumped up from his seat and rushed to threaten the new leader, saying that his master Kirk would tear everyone apart. The fighter with the axe saw his bloody owner at his feet and immediately shut up. After such a difficult day, Kirk lay in bed with Baby and thought about how they had somehow survived it all. If someone stronger than those who swing their fists or tear the earth to shreds appears, then the next one to die will most likely be himself. Kirk jumped up and ran to look for the bald elder. The old man was genuinely surprised and smiled, asking how Kirk could come to such an indecent place. The new leader asked the bald man about the enemies he had said were waiting for the hero in the future. The old man suggested visiting the Hills Society. He explained that it was a faction that included representatives of the lower classes. One could call them an information community, because they sell any information they obtain in their own way. Kirk explained that he wanted to go to this community himself to sort things out personally, and the old man promised to find him a companion. He asked the bald old man not to send that third abnormal elder to him. Kirk explained that he thought she was completely insane because she attacked him without warning last time. As a result, when the new leader was already riding in a carriage on a journey together with the red-haired elder. Not only that, the third elder, that same crazy Ginny, went with him, and she even dressed up as if she were going for a walk. Not long before this, the Council of Elders had gathered, and the bald old man asked to recommend someone to accompany him. Ginny and Daniel immediately volunteered to go. It was obvious that Ginny, who knew her geography, had to go, and she wanted to buy some treats and clothes herself. The red-headed man slammed his fist on the table and made it clear that he definitely had to go, since he and the chief were one. Ginny, in turn, began to argue with him, saying that he had never even been in Hill's society. She was very angry because Daniel did not dare to speak to the eldest like that. At this time, our hero, sitting in the carriage, thought that when he returned, he would finish off the bald man for such a setup. At this time, the coachman explained to the travelers that today they would have to stay at the motel, since it was already late. The street next to the hotel was full of drunk men and women. The hotel employee greeted them kindly and asked what the travelers needed in this place. The red-haired man said that they really needed a place to stay, food and some drinks, while the leader ordered himself some blood sausage soup. The clerk asked them to wait where they were so he could bring them what they needed. At this time, a group from the Moon sect entered the hotel lobby and asked if there were any rooms left with alcohol. The clerk explained to them that new customers had just occupied such rooms. One of the first disciples of the Moon sect turned to Kirk and told them to take other rooms, since this room was his. Suddenly, he noticed the third head standing next to Daniel and was amazed at her beauty. He was curious about where such a beauty came from, and he also said that he was from the first generation of the Moon sect. He suggested that she give up her companions and spend time with him. Going back to the previous events at the elders' meeting, Dwayne allowed 2 elders to conduct the chapter, but their actions were to be kept in the strictest confidence. Although Daniel was flushed and really wanted to punch the guys from the Moon sect, he couldn't afford it and explained that he would find other rooms. At this time, the first student noticed his face and was about to say something about the claims. But at that moment, the leader kicked him, and he fell to his knees in front of Kirk. After which he did not calm down, and the leader kicked him this time with his foot in the chin, so that the guy flew back several meters and spurted blood. After that, he yelled at the employee if the soup was ready, and Daniel couldn't understand what just happened and looked at the fallen guy. He thought that he in the third chapter hadn't even managed to stop Kirk. At this moment, the other friends of the first student rushed at the guests with blades at the ready. This time, the third chapter entered the battle, jumping high into the air. She threw knives at the bandits and shocked them with this maneuver, after which she descended to the ground and gave one of them a hard kick in the solar plexus. In the end, 2 of the first student's friends were already lying unconscious after the attack. The third elder ordered her guards to take care of them. She turned to the chief and said that they urgently needed to talk. Soon all 3 were sitting at the table waiting for their food. Ginny asked the chief if he knew who they had encountered. She said that they were disciples of the Moon sect, one of the Murim alliance that destroyed them. It was a dangerous act that could awaken nightmares from the past. She couldn't lose the boys who had become her family again, and Kirk remembered how he had been alone in the shelter before. Ginny said that they needed to prevent any more problems with Murim. The chief calmly promised her to be more careful, and Daniel was very surprised by his calm situation. The third elder also said that there are quite a few different sects. She made it clear that Kirk and Daniel would have to go to the Hills cult together, and she would stay here just in case and get rid of traces. Meanwhile, the travelers had already set off for the Hills sect. The chief thought that their journey was terribly long and yawned at every step. They entered one of the buildings with Daniel and asked who was in charge there. The old man bowed and modestly asked what they were interested in, and they told him that they had come for a special alcohol. Grandfather realized what was going on and led them to the stairs leading down somewhere. They followed the old man along a rather narrow tunnel and up a staircase that led to the basement. Finally, he led them to a room where the companions were already being greeted by Hilsum's manager, Manny. The manager thought that the baby sect had lost its status and was on the verge of collapse. Maybe he should have gone out in vain. The guests lounged at the table, and the manager asked why they had come to see him. He noticed how the boss was ignoring him and smirked at how even on the brink of collapse, he was behaving insolently. Many asked if he had shown any tactlessness towards the new head, and asked to tell him if something was wrong. Daniel was angered by the manager's words. He turned red as a lobster, and Kirk only smiled sarcastically. After which the new leader laughed an ominous laugh that rolled around the room. The manager decided that they liked his humor and also burst out laughing. Suddenly, he became serious and said that if they had nothing more to say, he would go. Our hero at this time turned to Daniel and asked again if Hills was somehow connected with Muram. After that, he turned towards Manny and pointed his finger at him. He called on the red-haired man to attack the Hills manager. Daniel jumped up from his seat and rushed at the manager with furious speed and fists. The next moment he punched Manny in the face with all his might, so hard that it flattened. Kirk loomed over Manny like a thundercloud and explained that the leader himself had come to talk to him, and that he had to show respect. Then an old man entered the room. In fact, it was the real manager. Daniel noticed him immediately. The old man screamed in horror at what he saw. Meanwhile, the red-haired man slowly tried to figure out what had actually happened. Kirk at this time said that he was wrong. He decided to achieve new goals with his imagination. Meanwhile, a masked figure was watching the palace, wondering where the head of the baby sect was now. The second masked man told him that he was currently in the Hill sect with the elder. The masked leader said that they would soon visit the new leader, and that he should prepare his throat. At this time, Manny was spitting out blood and thinking about how the members of the baby sect could humiliate the head of the Hills sect. Kirk offered the beaten Manny to sit down and have a normal conversation with him. The cunning Manny tidied himself up and sat down on a chair, asking why they had come to such a low place. Kirk sat down across the table from him and told him that he wanted to learn more about the other sects that were part of Muram. He also asked Manny to find strong guys who could help them. Chief Hills explained to Kirk that all this information was worth money and offered to pay him some amount. Kirk, in turn, turned to the red-haired man and said that no matter how rich a person is, after death it has no value. Daniel, in turn, understood what the head was getting at and laughed. Beads of sweat ran down Manny's face. He clearly tensed up at these words and offered an even lower price for the information. This time, Daniel turned to Kirk and asked if Manny would be happy to die in such an inconvenient place. The head of Hills was completely taken aback and jumped up from his seat. He shouted that in any case he could not give out information just like that. Kirk said that they would repay him well, and these words calmed Manny down. He breathed a sigh of relief. Daniel and the new leader explained that as a thank you and a gift, they would not kill Manny. The manager burst into tears from these words. He realized that he would not get anything from these guys. Kirk suggested getting to the point so as not to drag out this conversation for too long. The manager realized that no devil could compare with them and suggested that they sort and tell information about Muram. Kirk gave Manny just a week to gather information on who would want to join the kids' cult. The manager was taken aback by this information. He didn't think he would be able to do it in such a short time. Then Kirk took out his dagger and threatened Manny to meet the deadline exactly and not break it. Manny also told them about the Moon Sect. It was located on the top of a snowy mountain bordering the clouds. They were not easy to get to, and due to their destructive nature, not much was known about them. The only reason they were able to get into the 9 great schools was because despite the fact that they didn't have many students, each of them was strong. That's why after the war with the Blood Sect, for some reason they released all the students. Kirk suggested that the higher-ups were no longer keeping an eye on their younger students, and Manny agreed with his suggestion. He asked to send the rest of the information to the baby's sect, and finally asked what their relationship was like. When Manny suggested that they remained in a collaborative relationship, it upset Kirk. He put his hand on the poor guy's shoulder and explained that in his world, after the first battle, people become friends. Then Manny suggested that they were now friends, and this answer suited the chief just fine. He turned around and walked out of the room. He added at the end that friends are when Manny can sacrifice his life for Kirk, and Kirk in turn can sacrifice Manny's life for himself. As Daniel and Kirk rode back in the carriage, they discussed how Chapter 3 was still out there. Suddenly, the horse that was in the carriage began to neigh loudly, and the carriage stopped. A girl in uniform approached the carriage and explained that they had urgently blocked the road because an emergency had arisen. She informed him that for his safety, Kirk should immediately return directly to the kids' sect. A note was received saying that the Black Blood sect would soon come for the baby sect, so they had to keep their throats open. The bald old man offered to tell the leader what he knew about the Black Blood sect. The Black Blood sect was covered in fog, but they were known as a group without a specific location. The members of this sect mainly made money from contract killings. And also this sect worked without hesitation. They didn't care about gender and age, if there was money for which they did cruel things. The bald old man explained that there was nothing human about them, and this note was a harbinger of the hunt for the chief. At this time, a dark figure approached the gate of the Little One sect, and the guard aimed his spear at the figure. The bald man explained to the guards that if someone suspicious appeared, they had to attack immediately without delay. Therefore, the guard immediately rushed forward with a spear and did not notice how a dark figure had already appeared behind his back. The unknown masked ninja easily dealt with the two guards, leaving them no chance. After the two guards, the masked ninja was attacked by two more baby sex servants, but the ninja soared upward. The ninja released a smoke bomb, which completely blinded the guards. At this time, the third elder and the red-haired man realized that the killer had entered their palace. At this time, the ninja himself had already entered the throne room and was heading towards the throne on which someone was sitting. The speaker from the throne was surprised that the ninja came alone. Instead of the head of state, the throne was occupied by a figurehead, Yustaf, who acted as his substitute. The ninja didn't expect this turn of events, and at that moment Kirk snuck up behind him and pointed the gun at the back of his head. He didn't think twice and shot the masked man in the back of the head, killing him instantly. At that moment, the rest of the elders ran into the throne room and worriedly shouted to Kirk whether he was okay. The bald old man at this time screamed with delight. He explained that if the leader had not killed him, he would have killed them first. The third elder noticed that something had fallen from the killer's hands, and she went to examine the corpse. In the note, they read that the head of the Black Blood sect, Benny, wrote to them. He wanted to personally visit the new head, but he did not have much time. And wanting to establish a good relationship with the new leader, he sent the family heirloom, the necklace precious to the Black Blood sect, along with his most trusted and powerful servant. Kirk and his men just realized what they had done. The note said to prepare the neck for the necklace. Without a moment's hesitation, the chief pointed the barrel at the old man, who also stood in shock at this situation. He screamed and asked the chief to listen to him, but the bald man's face turned red. The elder explained that there had been some kind of delay on his way here, and he had also been killing their people. At this time, the guards of the baby sect ran into the throne room. It turned out that they did not die from the ninja, but simply lost consciousness for a while. This made Kirk even more angry, and he did not remove the gun from the back of the elder's head, intending to finish him off. Later at the council table, Dwayne explained that if this situation became known, the Murim would definitely pay special attention to them. Then a lot will change in their plan to conquer Murim. The third elder guessed that they might want to reminisce about the old days and thought that they should contact the Black Blood sect as soon as possible and apologize. Daniel didn't like her proposal. He started shouting about how the great sect of the kid could even ask for forgiveness. The bald old man raised his hand and wanted to speak out on the matter himself. Our hero, however, did not let his grandfather say a word and suggested that he take full responsibility upon himself. Grandfather, in turn, was very surprised. He did not understand how he could fulfill the request, and Kirk said that he could beg others on his knees. In the end, the first elder and his guards went to the Black Blood sect. A huge black gate opened in front of the three travelers, letting them into the palace. The travelers were greeted by masked guards who explained that the head of the Black Blood was in the room. When the bald old man and his guards entered the room, the senior leader Benny, wearing a mask with horns, was waiting for them near the window. He explained that he wanted to greet all the guests with hospitality, as expected. The chief prepared a huge table for the meal, on which there were many different treats. After some time, the elder had already gotten so drunk that he began to insult the head of his clan. One of the guards tried to stop him. Finally, Chief Benny asked the old man where the servant he had sent to the baby sect along with the necklace was. The elder cowered in fear and said that the servant had died. He couldn't see the chief's expression because of the mask. Benny explained to the old man that it was nothing, since the death of one of the servants was not uncommon. He hoped that the leader of the Little One's sect liked the necklace he sent him. At some point, the clan leader turned to the window and took off his mask. He smiled demonically, happy that the leader of another sect kept this necklace. He told the old man that they were now on equal terms. So Benny's precious servant died, and the old man's precious head died. The blood sect leader walked around behind the old man and placed his hands on his shoulders, explaining that the necklace had been sent. The old man started screaming that he couldn't believe that Benny had done such a vile thing. The leader offered him to die in his place since he was so dissatisfied. The old man stood up from his seat and made it clear that they had nothing more to talk about, so they would go. Benny laughed evilly and said that he didn't tell them that he would let them live. He took out a sharp knife from his clothes. The old man screamed in despair. He did not understand why his guards were calmly standing next to him and not taking action. Meanwhile, the head of the Black Blood sect came closer and swung a knife at the poor old man. At that moment, one of the grandfather's guards smiled and said that all this remains unchanged. Benny froze with his sword in his hands and watched the guard intently. He began to slowly remove his face, which turned out to be just a mask. He said that in his world, when helping Grandma and receiving a treat, no one ever eats it. Under the mask was Kirk, who immediately pulled out a gun and pointed it at Benny's face. Looking back, Dwayne went into Kirk's room to ask to take a closer look at the necklace. The hero had long ago abandoned him to his dog to play with and paid no attention. When Kirk handed the necklace to Dwayne and continued playing with the dog, Dwayne explained to him that he had good reason to be worried about the jewelry. After all, it contained poison, which means the necklace was not sent with good intentions. Kirk immediately jumped up from his seat. He asked if the kid who had just been playing with the necklace would die. Dwayne calmed him down, because only a little time had passed, but our hero was already beside himself with anger. He took out a gun and said that he would kill everyone involved. Dwayne explained to the chief that if he just went like that, it would be very risky, and he suggested that the hero make a mask. The bald old man blushed and made a happy face because the leader was alive. He, in turn, promised to deal with him later. Kirk still continued to aim the gun at the Black Blood leader's face. Benny smiled nervously and guessed that he had enjoyed dying even then. Kirk asked the chief with a serious face if he couldn't see who was in front of his face. The leader just laughed. It was the first time he had encountered such a weapon, but he thought that it would not be able to withstand his technique and stood in a stance. Before he could use his secret Black Blood technique, a bullet pierced his forehead. The next moment, the head of the Black Blood sect lay sprawled dead on the floor. A moment later, hundreds of soldiers in black masks appeared on the threshold. Kirk didn't seem impressed at all and ordered them to attack quickly. The soldiers rushed at him, and he began to fight them off with his pistol, blocking their blows. The old man was surprised. He was amazed every time by Kirk's method of fighting. The hero remembered that in his youth he often fought with a crowd, rather than one-on-one. But the way to defeat more people was very simple. You only had to kill one. The rest should have lost their enthusiasm themselves, but these creatures in masks did not change at all. The hero understood that he had very few bullets left to continue fighting alone. At this time, Ginny was in the Council of Elders' office, pestering Dwayne for allowing him to go alone. The elder drank a cup of tea and told her not to worry. He said he had let the chief go, but he didn't say he had sent him alone. At that very moment, a red-haired man jumped from somewhere on the roof into the office, straight towards our hero. Kirk was surprised, not understanding how Daniel ended up there. The red-haired man screamed loudly that he would make them wake up in hell. The hero thought that Daniel came alone, but his Tiger's Mouth group immediately appeared on the horizon. He gathered his entire squad of the Tiger's Mouth assault team. Kirk thought that he had finally done something good, and since the revenge was over, he ordered Daniel to finish it. The red-haired one smeared one masked ninja after another. The hero thought that the red-haired man could sometimes be very useful, and besides, he was strong. Suddenly, a ninja with a sword flew up from behind the leader. The bald old man only managed to shout towards Kirk. However, before the killer could even strike the leader once, he had already cut his throat with a spin, since he had already sensed his approach. When the allies got out into the street, the red-haired one asked the leader what to do with the rest of the survivors. The hero thought, judging by the way they fought to the last, if he took them away, nothing good would come of it. Suddenly, a small, trembling figure with a sword in his hands appeared in front of the leader. Kirk removed the mask from the figure's face, revealing a child underneath. A small boy, shaking with fear and with tears welling up in his eyes. The sight of the little boy flashed the hero back to when he was begging on the streets as a child and was beaten because people thought he was slacking off. Kirk was a small, skinny boy, asking the leader for forgiveness and saying he would try harder. The leader knelt down in front of the boy and asked if there were any other soldiers his age. The boy shook his head, and in the background someone tried to yell at him, but was immediately shot. Kirk told the boy to close his eyes, took him by the hand and led him away from the battlefield, ordering Daniel to destroy everyone else. While the four travelers were riding in the carriage, the red-haired man watched the boy closely. He thought that the leader also had such a side. He was much warmer than he seemed at first glance. Finally, Daniel decided to ask the boy his name and moved closer to him, making an interested face. The boy was frightened by such an expression on his face and pouted. Tears immediately appeared in his eyes. He clasped his little hands and thanked his companions for leaving him alive. The boy promised to do his best in any job he was given. But the chief just looked out the window at the sunny city and told the boy to have fun, because children just need to eat well and have fun. When the travelers returned to the palace, they were already met by Ginny, Gustav, and Dwayne. The third head noticed a little boy in the corridor and asked who it was. They explained to her that they found the boy along the way. A happy baby, who had not seen his master for a long time, also ran out to the travelers. Kirk asked why his dog didn't come straight to him. But the kid stopped and sat down at the boy's feet, right opposite him. The boy looked at the dog in surprise, as if he had never seen a dog before. He reached out and stroked the kid, who in turn wagged his tail contentedly. Kirk suddenly smiled. For some reason, he was very happy that the boy had become friends with a member of his family. The rest froze in amazement, as they did not expect the leader to be able to smile at all. The headman turned and threw over his shoulder for the boy to take care of the kid, and at the same time asked him what his name was. The boy replied that he was the 121st because he never had a real name. The chief explained that the boy's name was now Ron, who in turn was very surprised that he had been given a name. Kirk asked the boy to just live happily every day. The boy was so touched by the chief's words that he burst into tears and promised him to live happily. Before Kirk left for good, Dwayne asked him to read the letter on the scroll. The leader opened it and told Daniel to get ready because they were going on a journey to find their colleagues. This letter was written by the manager of Manny. He suggested to go after his allies. The leader of this sect was called Conan. He was so good that he could be considered the strongest even among his 10 masters. Kirk lay back on the bed and imagined that he could definitely be useful if he could be lured over to their side. In the morning, he was woken up again. Only instead of Daniel's red head, there was also a boy's head. As per tradition, Kirk slapped the red-haired man in the face and immediately woke up. It felt as if a stone had crushed him in his sleep. He couldn't understand what the kid was doing there in the morning. Daniel explained that he had woken him up so that the boy could see the king's face at least once in the morning, after which he took out the waistcoat and offered the chief to try it on. Kirk refused to try it on, saying they weren't going to a carnival. But the boy and Daniel begged him to put on this suit, which seemed smart to them. Finally, Kirk gave in to persuasion and tried it on. The boy and the red-haired man noted that the suit suited the leader very well. The boy took his leave and promised to do his best to have fun in Kirk's absence and wished him a safe journey. As the chief left, he smiled at the boy and asked him to have fun for both of them. Finally, when the two travelers came out into the street, Kirk noticed that they were putting too many things in the cart. He did not understand why so much was needed if they were only traveling together. Daniel forgot to mention that Ginny was also traveling with them, and all of these things were her own. The third elder dressed up in a beautiful off-the-shoulder dress, but the leader calmly ordered her to change. Although he was partly a little mesmerized by her appearance. As the trio sat in the carriage, Daniel explained to Kirk that they couldn't go straight ahead, so they were going around. Ginny added that since there was no direct contact with the head, they arranged a meeting with his deputies. At that moment, the horse whinnied softly, as if it could no longer bear the journey. The chief was informed that the horses were tired and could not go further. Daniel suggested spending the night somewhere here, because they still needed to eat. Eventually, they made a fire, and Ginny cooked a delicious dinner. The chief devoured it with pleasure, but only noted that the dinner was normal. Suddenly, a noise was heard from the forest, and both elders turned around at the sound. A girl, all rumpled, in torn and dirty clothes, came out from the bushes and asked to borrow some food. Ginny had a very bad feeling about this. She crossed her arms over her chest and watched the stranger. She noticed that she was clearly running away from someone and explained that they did not need any conflicts. The stranger explained that she would eat quickly and leave, and without further questions, she pounced on the pots of food. Kirk immediately thought that the girl was some kind of crazy. She was throwing herself at the plates indiscriminately. In the end, she decided to introduce herself. The girl's name was Sonia. She promised to repay them for all these treats. Ginny told her that there was no need for unnecessary words, and if the girl had eaten, then she had better go on her way. Sonia said goodbye and left, wishing her a pleasant appetite. But the chief saw no point in this because she had eaten everything. He rose from his seat to go to the cart, while Ginny prepared more food. As Kirk approached the cart, he heard the sound of approaching hooves and looked back. Knights appeared on the road, and their leader showed them a drawing of a girl and asked if they had seen her. The hero exhaled, believing that he had to endure all this and not break down. He waved his hand and said that he hadn't seen anyone, and now they needed to get lost as he was very tired. The guard didn't like the chief's words. He blushed and shouted about what this guy was allowing himself to do. The chief's patience was at an end. He turned to the rider with a menacing look, but at that moment a calm voice explained that they had not seen the girl. It was Ginny who arrived in time and calmed him down. She suggested that they each go their separate ways. Before leaving, the guards asked to check the cart, and the chief, looking displeased, approached the doors to open them. When he opened the doors of the cart, he saw something he never expected. This wandering girl was sitting there and eating their provisions. It was a complete setup. Kirk certainly didn't expect her to be there. The enraged horsemen sensed the deception and drew their blades to kill the travelers. A crowd of enraged swordsmen on horseback rushed straight at Kirk and Ginny. The third elder tried to reason with the chief and offered to discuss everything with him, but he informed her with a grin that it was too late. At this moment, Daniel jumped out of nowhere and knocked the rider off his horse while moving and stood on his chest with his foot. Kirk and the red-haired man looked into each other's eyes with a demonic gaze and rushed into battle together. The head of the swordsman was seriously scared, deciding that they would all die like cattle. He decided to escape and report this situation as soon as possible. However, the next moment the bullet caught up with the fugitive and pierced his head through and through. The third elder held her head and explained that it was all reckless, because they had touched the government. The head explained that in the place where he lived, they said, "If there are no witnesses, then it is a secret murder." At that moment, a blonde climbed out of the cart. While she was eating, she didn't even understand what had happened. The blonde turned out to be the daughter of the head of the forests. She thanked the travelers and promised to thank them for everything someday. The head, in turn, asked her to introduce him to his father, and she was extremely surprised by this. The next moment, they were already standing in the place where the servants were supposed to approach and lead them inside. Two boys ran out onto the field and excitedly asked the girl why she had run away alone without warning. The servants turned out to be twins. The girl waved to them in greeting and explained that she was simply looking for a new experience. She introduced the twins to the travelers and said that they saved her life. The twins immediately bowed and thanked the travelers for saving the life of their mistress. The blonde in turn asked them to meet with their father, and for a moment the twins wondered if their visit would cause any problems. She explained that the travelers were very good and there definitely shouldn't be any problems. Sometime later, they were already standing in front of huge gray gates. When they opened, the travelers went inside and heard a voice like a clap of thunder right behind them. They realized that someone was standing behind them. It was the huge head of the forests. Ginny raised her head high and greeted the owner of the huge house. He wondered why these three had come here. Kirk decided to get straight to the point and voiced that he wanted the leader to help them with his forces in the battle for Murim. The leader burst out laughing. He had not expected such an answer and really did not like Murim. He thought for a moment and explained that he couldn't just help a stranger without a reason. One of the servants ran up to the leader and whispered something in the thug's ear. The leader stood up from his seat, considering the information a good idea, and advanced menacingly towards Kirk. Kirk wanted to take out his pistol, as he considered this gesture a surprise attack, but the thug put his hands on his shoulders. The next moment he proposed to the head of the baby to marry his beautiful daughter. Ginny and Daniel's mouths dropped open at the sudden proposal. The head of the forest in turn looked menacingly at Kirk and asked why he was not answering, as if he did not like his daughter. Kirk decided not to think for long and showed his answer on his fingers. He put out his middle finger and showed it to the leader. The bully didn't understand what it meant. He thought that the middle finger meant agreement. At that moment, the third elder ran up to the hero, laughing hysterically, and covered Kirk's mouth so that he wouldn't blurt out anything. The old man thought about it. He knew that the question was not easy because his daughter's marriage was at stake. Finally, he gave them an hour to decide on an answer, and after some time, the three travelers were sitting at the table. Kirk felt that the sudden marriage was a ridiculous condition, and he did not want to marry a stranger. Ginny suggested that he go and settle the matter himself. Suddenly, Kirk's phone vibrated, and he opened a text message that said he had to form an alliance with the 36 houses of the forest chief. The hero explained that he had to settle this issue himself. He, along with Daniel and Ginny, headed back to the throne room to the brute. Kirk explained that he did not want to marry his daughter. Instead, the chief extended his hand to the chief of the forest and invited him to become brothers. The brute didn't understand what he meant and frowned. He suggested that the sworn brothers should have some degree of equal status and that the leader could please him. Kirk, in turn, did not lose his composure and offered the leader a bet. He invited him to play a game known as flag stealing. The method was simple. 3 representatives from each faction had to be selected, with the bet being that the team that captured the opponent's flag first would win. Kirk proposed that if he won, they would become brothers and support their strength, and if he lost, he would gracefully give in and leave. But the thug wasn't so stupid. He said that if Kirk lost, he would become his son-in-law and marry his daughter. The hero agreed to the big guy's condition, and after a while they were standing on the court before the game. The red-haired man said that if he had to come face-to-face with the big guy, he would last about 15 minutes. The leader realized that this meant that they had to capture the flag within 15 minutes. He turned to the third elder to give her special instructions. Kirk explained to her that as soon as the signal was received, she should run as fast as she could to the flag, avoiding any encounters with enemies. The leader himself loaded the pistol and said that he would deal with the enemies who would get in the way. After the game started, Ginny ran as fast as she could towards enemy territory. Kirk himself ran through the forest towards his goal, trying to reach the place where the flag was hidden. He saw a flag nearby and hid behind a tree. He was surprised that there was no one around to protect enemy territory. The leader didn't think long and ran as fast as he could to the flag to get it while no one was there. But as he ran, the huge figure of the head of the forest loomed over him. He pushed the guy in the chest with great force so quickly that he didn't expect it. Kirk flew several meters and hit his back into a tree, cutting off the bark. The head of the forest looked like a huge, ominous wall that had to be broken through. He calmly stepped aside and suggested that Kirk call it a day. The next moment, he took out his pistol and pointed it at the thug. Blood was still running down the leader's bloody face. The brute looked back ominously and bared his teeth. He sensed some sounds. The next moment, the head of the forest caught Ginny by the face in his huge hand and squeezed it hard. Kirk stood up from his seat. He realized that his ribs were most likely damaged, but he wanted to save the third elder. At that moment, a red-haired elder attacked the brute from behind. With great force, he hit him in midair with his fist, so that the big guy flew away and Ginny fell out of his hand. Kirk realized that Daniel had simply left their flag and came running to help. He was very angry because they could lose. The head of the forest burst out laughing and said that he came to the game alone. Kirk was surprised that the forest chief was so confident that he was going to defeat them alone. The red-haired man understood that he needed to continue to distract the big guy and rushed at him again. Their fists almost merged into one under the powerful blow. Daniel was a little exhausted from such a powerful series of blows. He sank to the ground. Suddenly, the thug felt pain in his right leg, where a bullet fired by our hero was already visible. He asked the big guy if he was the one groaning there because you can't underestimate an enemy with a gun. The forest chief admitted that this was an amazing secret martial art. But he was not to be broken, because the next minute he was already smiling, making it clear that they would never reach his flag. Kirk scratched his head with his gun. He knew that with a monster like him it would definitely not be easy. But nevertheless, even if the most impenetrable metal is processed little by little, it will crack. The brute didn't understand what he wanted to say and rushed at him with great speed, calling for him not to chat but to fight. This time, however, Kirk fired again, aiming at the running titan. The bullet stopped the forest chief and he fell to one knee, feeling pain in his leg. At this time, the red-haired man ran past the thug and headed straight for the flag. But the brute gathered all his strength and jumped right in front of him, leaving a hole in the ground. He hit Daniel with all his might and he flew back several meters. The Titan then saw Kirk running towards the flag and jumped on top of him. Our hero remembered that not long ago he received a task on his mobile phone to defeat 5 masters without killing them. For this task, there was an additional reward. The hero had a flashbang grenade in his hand and he threw it high into the air so that the thug noticed it. The next moment, the grenade exploded, blinding the Titan. He grabbed his eyes and screamed at the top of his lungs. At this time, the cunning Kirk climbed the mountain with the flag and was already sitting there and looking down at the giant. The brute burst out laughing and admitted that no one had made him laugh like that for many years. They shook hands to seal their friendship. Now they have officially become brothers, cementing their friendship. In the evening, they were already happily drinking by the fire, on which a roasted boar was spinning. Everyone around rejoiced in honor of the baby's sect. They also welcomed Kirk, who defeated the head of the forest. Kirk asked Daniel where Ginny had gone. He hadn't seen her all evening, and the red-haired man explained that she was feeling unwell. Our hero remembered how badly she suffered during the battle. At this time, the third elder stood on the balcony and thought that she had not helped at all today. She felt like a burden to the leader. Suddenly, Kirk came onto the balcony and asked her why she was alone here with her thoughts. Ginny apologized to him for being useless and weak. She was still embarrassed. He turned to her and said that it wasn't her fault, it was just that the head of the forest was a monster, and that was all. Kirk told her that when they stumbled, all they had to do was brush the dust off their knees and stand up with their heads held high. He explained to her that he would soon challenge that guy to a fight, and if she was tormented by useless thoughts, she could just eat noodles. The head left, and Ginny continued to watch him go, embarrassed by the attention he was giving her. She was warmed by Kirk's words. When our hero came down, he saw that the head of the forest and Daniel were already dead drunk and flushed from the alcoholic drinks. Kirk thought that it was time to go back to the house, but he was dared, and he also got drunk along with his friends. In the morning, Sonia held out a gift that she had personally prepared for the travelers, and the leader reached out to take it. But the gift was not for Kirk, but for Daniel, whom she liked. The red-haired man smiled slyly and accepted the gift from the girl's hands. He was clearly pleased with himself. Sometime later, When the travelers arrived home, they were met on the threshold by a small fat man whom Kirk did not recognize at first. This was the same boy whom the hero saved and left under the care of plump Yustaf. When Kirk found himself in his room on his bed, Baby came running to him, happy to see his dad. At that moment, there was a knock on the headman's room and an announcement that a guest had arrived so late. When the door opened, Kirk saw a breathless and sweaty Sonya, who had been running after him all the way to give him the letter that her father had forgotten to deliver. The letter said something important about Nancy's league. At this very time, guests arrived in the quarter of hotels and lanterns. They asked the hotel clerk if there had been warriors in white robes there recently, and the owner replied that they had been there recently. It was Hans, the chief disciple of the mountain faction and the next leader, who paid the master and ordered him to be brought to them. In the room the student came into, there were 3 guys who were dead drunk and demanded more alcohol. The travelers decided to place a wanted poster in which the criminals were drawn: Ginny, Kirk, and Daniel. Kirk immediately called a council of elders and said that he had checked the letter from the head of the forest. It said to contact the Nangan Association and find someone who could help. The reason why they are not affiliated with any faction is because they sort of didn't fit into the group. One of them left due to circumstances beyond his control or of his own free will, or because they are so powerful that they don't need to belong to any particular place. Although they have the advantage that they can support themselves with their own power at any time, there is also a disadvantage. They can become enemies at any moment. Dwayne explained that asking them for help might not be the wisest decision. Kirk, in turn, informed his comrades that they could offer the warriors something more valuable than money, and that was threats. The members of the Council of Elders were taken aback by surprise. They did not understand how anyone could be bought with this. Kirk said that there are not many things in this world that are more valuable than money, but there is one thing that surpasses it, and that thing was his own life. He realized that if they achieved dominance in the world of martial arts, they would be able to destroy those who were on the side of their enemy. And if they promise decent compensation to those who take their side, then there will be people who will become loyal. Dwayne knew they didn't have enough money, so there could only be one compensation. The leader explained that in any case, this time he would go with Ginny and Daniel. But Ginny interrupted him. She said that she could not go with Kirk this time since, on the last trip, she had become acutely aware of her shortcomings, and she realized that she could not be of use yet. Kirk denied it. He had already told her about her usefulness and thoughts last time. However, the girl still refused. She planned to go on another journey on her own to improve herself. Kirk sighed and called on Second Elder Dwayne to come with him, but he also refused. He was in charge of the affairs of the baby sect, and his absence could complicate things. Kirk had no choice but to choose between the chubby Yustaf and the bald old man. The bald old man suddenly yelled that unfortunately he couldn't help with their mission, so only the chubby one was left. After some time, they were already riding together in a carriage on a mission, and Sonya was also present with them, from whom Daniel turned away in embarrassment. When they arrived at their destination, Kirk stepped out of the carriage and saw a dark village in front of him. They looked around, and at that time someone was watching them from the top of a tree. While Kirk was pondering his thoughts, something bent the plump Yustaf in half. The chief noticed that an arrow had hit the fat man right in the side, which meant that there had been an ambush. Daniel screamed at the top of his lungs, covering his eyes and trying to find out who the shooter was. An archer jumped silently from the tree and explained that he had expected more from the master's guest, but he could not even dodge the arrow. He explained that if they entered the Nangan Union, they would be killed immediately. The red-haired man asked the archer who he was to attack them, and he replied that he was their guide. He shared that he felt like they would die before they could even enter the Nangan unification, let alone join it. Our hero looked at the archer arrogantly and asked why he had such a long tongue. Did he really want to die? The archer explained that in order to join the Nangan alliance, someone had to vouch for Kirk's abilities, and if he passed the test, the archer would vouch for him. At this time, poor plump Yustaf was suffering from severe pain from an arrow in his side. The archer pointed to a target in the field and explained that Kirk needed to hit the arrow right there. The chief thought that it was as easy as pie, but the archer explained that it was necessary to hit not the mish itself, but the target after the target. Kirk was confused by this explanation and asked again if he should go around the first target to hit the one behind it. The archer decided to simply show how it works and pulled the bowstring. The arrow fired by the archer magically went around the first target and hit the second one, which was standing behind it. She hit the target squarely in the middle. The archer explained that it was easy as pie and only after passing the test would he agree to be the hero's guide. The hero refused to take his bow, deciding to use his own and took out a gun. He knew that he had no other choice. Either he would hit the target or he would be killed.